My name is Sasha Starr, and my guests for today are Professor Ken Regan. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a great fighting day at Wike.
Yes, we're going to talk about it. And Jim Ida from Ida Foundation. Hello, Jim. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Okay, we are all
Oops.
doing great.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So let's talk about we can say today was a penultimate last round, and it was a lot of fighting chess. And I believe, Ken, you would like to show one of the games that were
Yes,
played.
indeed. Yep. So I guess we should start with the with El Capo, El Jefe Carlson. So I will. So he played a game that for which there are some interesting comments to make. Wait a second.
Technology.
Yeah, I think he might have frozen. Um,
Yeah, it may happen someday.
but
Okay.
What's that?
Oh, okay.
Wait,
Got
I'm
it back.
back. But I don't know if my sharing is. Oh, here we go. And my sharing is starting to take effect.
Okay,
So,
great.
do you see Carlson versus Pragnananda?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this game has several significances around it. One, as far as the standings go, Carlson was trying to climb back into contention. If he had won this game, he would have been tied with Anishiri at just a half point behind the leader, Abdusattorov.
Yeah.
So that was definitely important, vital for fighting for first in the tournament.
Yes.
Second, Carlson is facing one of the new younger generation of prodigies,
Yes.
Ramesh Babu Pragnananda.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is a long-awaited showdown at such an elite in-person classical chess event. Okay, and well, then Magnus came out loaded for bear, as we'll see in the opening. He
And he has
definitely
white pieces besides.
Yeah. He's got to
was
play for a win. Yeah.
Yes, he definitely played for win. He came out intending to carry the fight from, I would say, the sixth move onward of what began as a symmetrical opening. So often Carlson plays uh, openings where there's a lot of maneuvering and refrains from initial contact. But even though this is a symmetrical position, contact develops fairly rapidly in this game. Okay, so this is symmetrical English defense. Um, and that's also a slow move, but it's useful to prevent a black piece from coming to b4. And it's a building move while we wait for black to break the action in the center. And black does. Okay, so now white recaptures and develops a piece. Black makes a similar move. Now white could capture
Huh. Yeah. Right.
uh, on c5. That would exchange queens and bring about what is often a fairly drawish endgame. But instead, white creates a classic isolated queen pawn position, which often, as in this case, allows for an attack on the opposing king. Okay, so black captures, and now we have this isolated queen pawn position, where now it's obvious that the pawn on a3 is doing a good job preventing black from playing a knight that would harass this bishop and solidify the d5 square. So black plays a fairly committal move of his own.
Yeah.
Instead of just developing classically with the
Right.
bishop to e7 or d6 and castling into the attack, so to speak, black plays right away to blunt the white bishop that would otherwise be targeting h7, and also to bring pressure on white's d pawn. And we're going to see a wholesale change in character of black's king side. Right now, it looks like this has created a weakness on the dark squares, but truth is going to change. Okay, so white plays bishop b g5 to start putting pressure on the dark squares. But in some ways, this may be a little premature for white, especially this move. This is, not even castling. Well, so It is, however, though, if you notice at the bottom, where I'm showing the engine evaluations, it is the preferred move of the engine.
It's very interesting to me because it's not something that I would have considered.
Yeah, it's even what's your purpose? Are you going to take the knight on c6? That
Apparently,
usually doesn't work out so well.
yeah,
Um, so, but what it does do is it puts control of the d5 square. It makes sure that
wow,
black cannot take over the d5 square.
that's a good
And,
point. Interesting.
yeah, and it's tied to a conception about a judgment about the nature of weaknesses of squares that will result. So the other thing white can do is play knight e4, but this exchanges two pairs of
Right,
pieces. Is probably drawish. The castle's move, which is what I would play,
right,
is third according to the engines. This may be one way that engines are used to prospect for new opening ideas.
right. Because
So I'm
castle
just
would have been my natural tendency as well.
yeah.
But if the engine tells you this is better, you have to look at it and then you add it to your opening repertoire.
Right. And so, in fact, one thing to notice down here is this is Stockfish 15.1, the current Stockfish. The natural move I would make as black would be to castle or play h6 to hit white's bishop.
Right.
But both of those moves are below the fold of this weird knight a7 move to avoid the double pawns or whatever, or maybe playing an echo of how one of the games was played yesterday. Or maybe it was it Pragnanda himself played yesterday with knight h2. I think so. But anyway, um, if the other moves are worse than that, then they're giving white a tangible advantage. So in fact, Pragnananda played knight e7, and this looks weird, moving a piece twice in the opening, but it's all about control of d5.
Exactly.
Uh, so now white plays h4, and this is where Carlsen starts shooting for bear. Now there's no doubt about white's attention. We're not going to castle on the king side. And we're not going to play through the center necessarily, although that'll change.
Right.
We are going to threaten an attack on the king side. Okay.
But
So
h6
starts a countermeasure, and now one of white's bishops bites the dust. But now you see the bishop on e4 suddenly looks very good. It's not observed by a knight. Black's light square bishop is still on the home square.
And the bishop on c8 looks very bad compared to the bishop on e4. So
yeah, and black does not have control of d5. So okay, so white now plays here, stops back from castling. Well, black puts a piece on d5, and now white plays the further idea of h4 was to soften up black's king side. And now white's bishop on e4 looks very good indeed. Instead of being blocked by pawns on g6 and h7, now it has a free reign with the pawns on g5 and h6. Still, black is fairly solid, but white now, charge ahead again.
Yep.
Again, not resolving where the king is going to live. So black plays back, and now, in fact, actually. The engine says that black should resolve the status of the d5 knight, either take back the previous move and put it back on e7, or capture on c3. Indeed, the engine here might have preferred black to play h5, but that also would have enhanced the scope of white's g6 bishop by kind of fixing g6 as a potential sensitive spot.
Yeah, I might prepare g4 and then storming the castle that way. So it's interesting, but that's a good point to point out that you're fighting for d5, but the knight on e7 is doing a good job there.
Yeah.
So do you want to put it on d5 or keep it there?
Yeah, I'll keep it there.
Very good question.
You could also counterattack against d4.
True.
You probably need to have done a lot of preparation, and maybe it was Carlsen, not Pragnananda, who had done that preparation.
Right.
I should look at clock times. I'm not sure if these clock times are real for the move in the game. You could also just play the bishop back. It's a little bit exposed on f6.
And yeah, and it would prepare you to castle too. So,
Yeah.
but
And
you might not want to castle because h4 is a clear declaration.
yeah. So anyway, so playing the knight to d5 maybe also provoked white to play h5.
Yes.
So now black plays bishop g7, but the engine already says that white has a fairly sizable edge,
Wow.
either with just castling or with playing rook d1.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here Carlsen, I guess, carried out a vision of the kind of position he wanted.
This is really, again, another counterintuitive move. I would not have played that.
Yeah, it's two knights against two bishops. But the dominant feature in the position very soon is that white is able to play two rooks to the center quicker than black can. Okay,
True.
so bishop e6 to batten the hatches down. Now
Oh,
rook.
he's going to play f4, f5. Yeah.
Yeah. So black.
Ooh.
Yeah. So black played rook e3,
Right.
and now black played a way. I'm not sure tactically how this was designed against f4. Let's take a look. I guess it's saying black can just ignore it because black can come out to g5 with the queen, and I guess the bishop is able to block the file. I don't know. Let's see. Well, let's let's see. If white plays f4. Yeah, okay. Now the engine is saying that black should play f6.
Right.
Okay. All right. So can't go too much on appearances of the engine. All right. So now we're going to reach a critical moment in this game, however, though. So Carlsen played queen d1.
Yeah, because you know what was in the air too, Ken? Sorry to interrupt, but the bishop takes knight, and then d takes e, and then d4.
Yeah, that's true.
On c3 and the rook on e3.
Yeah.
So I think queen retreat is one way to try to deal with that. But
right, so that taking the knight is not hitting the queen.
Right.
Yeah, let's see. But if bishop takes e5 now, I think just taking with the rook is good for white. I mean, so one thing now, if you get a position like this, now the dark squares around black's king are very clearly weak.
Right.
Plus the dominating position of white's pieces, plus black's bishop is not really biting on anything. It doesn't have anything to do except be a stupid defender on e6. Right. So you don't want to capture that knight anyway.
No.
But now black played one loose move, rook e8. And this is apparently where Carlsen could have pounced, but you can't blame the move that Carlsen made either. So as people pointed out in the commentary chat at this point, and I think actually also either Chess24 or Chess.com broadcast this on Twitter. So you can, there is a 15-minute delay. But also, the chess players themselves are not reading Twitter. So it's okay to say, hey, Carlsen is the good move. Knight takes f7 works according to the engine. All right, so Carlsen could have done this. And the point actually is that white is able to pile on and regain the piece with advantage fairly quickly. In fact, it's obvious enough that white is going to regain the piece and leave black now with a weak light squared complex. That I do have to wonder why Carlsen didn't play this, because after this, I mean, it's not just, I mean, I'm sure you could play g4 right away.
Or queen d3.
Yeah, I mean, queen d3 is good too. So it's obvious enough that to me that knight takes f7 works. So what the engine says is that black just has to give back. Black just has to give back the pawn. And now, okay, maybe there's some activity. Maybe this is what Carlsen didn't like, was allowing this activity. Maybe it's hard to judge a position like this because it is just one pawn for white. Now black's bishop is well employed, and d3 is coming down. So even though white can capture black's bishop, black will still have much the better heavy pieces, and white's pawn on e5 isn't so healthy. So it may be that Carlsen was originally planning that or thinking of that, and then thought that that after Queen D7, oops, sorry, I missed here.
Right.
Sorry, let me. So after Queen D7, what else is there for White to do? There's no other move that keeps the engine. If you advantage, if you trade rooks, now the knight is trapped, and E5 will be double covered with black. So the only way to preserve the knight is to put it back on E5 and allow this combination doing exactly what you said, Jim, before, of mobilizing the D pawn.
Yeah, and it's a good lesson that this you don't always have to recapture.
Yeah,
And this is a great example of that, because capturing back the knight clearly is worse for black, but ignoring it seems to be just fine.
yeah. And maybe the engine is wrong about this 1.00 evaluation. Maybe if I get, further on to the position that we showed, maybe black's completely fine. And that might be something that a human player can judge to better depth in the engine. This is depth 23, which is very typical of the depths that I use for my cheating detection.
Should be adequate, one would think. But
yeah, should be adequate, certainly indicative, but maybe not really in terms of what's going on with the position. So if we jump ahead to this thing, it's saying White can maybe cause some trouble with the check, and the engine is consistently saying White is a pawn or so ahead, but not all pawn advantages are created equal.
Yes,
I mean, after
Queen, what would you like to play? What kind of
that?
position would you like to play?
Yeah, and I would judge that black is fine here. This White's not going forward with F4 anytime soon. The White's pawn isn't going anywhere. So I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know either.
Yeah, well, but anyway, it's something for another day. And actually, the engine says that no, things are actually going to happen. Black plays King F7, and White goes ahead with E6 check. And well, you trade queens, you get a queen ending. Hey, we're going to show a queen ending anyway. All right, so maybe it reaches a queen ending where White is a solid pawn up. Well, anyway, okay. Interesting topic, and I'm not trying to be a grandmaster doing this game quickly, but I'm trying to go a little beyond the experience players have watching these games with engines. Probably this should look for the post-game press conferences and see what Carlsen said about this position. At any rate, there's absolutely no objection to White's move. White played rook E1. Now you have two rooks solidly occupying this file. The knight on E5 is strong. Black's position is kept under wraps. So, so
Black, now knight takes F7 is threatened.
Knight takes F7 was definitely threatened there. So black fell back to shore up the position. But black's bishop on E6 is really just a big pawn. So now the question is, what else can White do? And White is a choice of trying to do more on the king side or expand on the queen side, because White's knights have more scope on the queen side than black's bishops. And that's exactly what Carlsen did. So black played this to stop the knight from coming in any further. But now things are softened up a little on the queen side. White could have also played the queen to that square. Pragnananda decided to shed a pawn for the benefit of giving some exchanges. Okay, so now the question is...
Again, you'd rather have a queen and knight than queen and bishop, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, that's right.
But in this position, the game is played on both flanks and in the center. So in that respect, maybe bishop is not so bad. But bishop on e6 is a very defensive piece. It's not really doing much else.
On the other hand, black's pawn is mobile.
In fact, d4, all of a sudden everything changes. If you get that in. And
so the engine says to play knight c3, and then there's nothing wrong with d4 for
All right.
black.
All right. It's
Um,
quite a strong
so
move.
luckily white has this move,
It's
Right.
the only move.
which hits the rook, so therefore black will trade and white captures with the knight. But now rook and whereas queen and knight are often better than queen and bishop, rook and bishop
Yes.
generally outpace rook and knight.
Absolutely.
So it's one of the little secrets of chess. The reason
Mhm.
why queen and bishop are not so good together is that they're redundant on each other, but rook
Correct.
and bishop supplement each other.
Precisely the
So,
case.
so cycling back, Carlson actually has to defend a little bit, so decided to protect the rook and knight this way. It's still white's queen is a little bit overloaded, so black can
Oops.
put the bishop on a square like that to attack it and
Provoking that.
hit the knight. So now it's important. What black has created is a diagonal along which to give check to the
Now,
white
yeah.
king. There
And,
we go, and this is eventually how Pragnananda is going to win back his pawn.
and I was going to say Queen B6 picks up the B pawn instead
That's
of
true. It's worth looking at.
But I think the way he's playing it is a little bit more aggressive. But just in terms of material, because then you win the D pawn. Oh yeah, but with you to play knight takes D5, you have
White and knight takes this
yeah,
would be curtains on black. Yeah, that's the flaw. So
that's
actually,
the flaw.
what the game is really about here, and in isolated queen pawn positions, the game very often is about the squares d5 and d4.
Yes.
So now black's bishop is suddenly a very good piece, and so white decided therefore to instigate a combination to trade it off. Now,
Wow.
if white had played a natural, the problem is knight e4 is not attractive because then the e pawn hangs with check, and f5 might pin the knight to the rook actually.
Yeah, you really didn't want to play F3, but we're forced to because of the
Yeah.
over defense of the queen. Yeah.
Right. And playing knight b1 isn't attractive. Of course, the pawn is pinned. It's not really threatening white's knight. But what is white able to do in the meantime? Well, what white did was calculate a very forcing line. Okay, now it is true that black could capture on e5 and be okay. But we're going to see some positions where maybe white had the better side of okay. And this could be one of them. So here, black has a pawn, but now white is got the rook in a good position behind the pawn.
Right.
And maybe at the worst for white, we'll trade pawns on the queen side. But black might have some things to worry about here. That's probably just a draw. But instead, Pragnananda played his own uncompromising move. He hangs his rook with check, but is going to make a queen and dares Carlson to see what to do about the queen he's going to make. So it's interesting actually from this point. Yeah, Carlson has to be in the counterattack. Now, to be fair, e6 is also an effective counterattack.
That's what I would have played. Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, F4, yeah, that's
F4,
shockingly good.
queen, and now this amazing quiet position. We're not instantly even. We are threatening to checkmate black with F6.
Right.
But it's black's move. 2 queens on the board, but no checks. So it's not actually all that obvious how to find a defense in this position for black.
Do you have to defend F7?
You have to defend F7 and
queen C7 probably.
Yes. So doing that has the benefit also of pinning white's e pawn.
Correct.
So there's less attack that's going to come down the pike at you. So now black was able to play king h7 and guard it. So now it's up to white to press the attack, and the answer is a very simple move.
Wow.
And it looks like black does not have a defense to queen g7 mate.
It was my first thought, was how do you defend that?
Yeah, then it should be noted that this was the time control move, although if these clock times are right, Pragnananda had left enough time to think.
So
And
queen takes
so,
pawn. Yeah,
yes,
that's the
one
only
black's
move.
queen gets sacrificed, and now you have a perpetual check, or capturing white's rook with check if white wants to try to win. So Carlsen always wants to try to win. So white now hangs a rook with check.
Oh yeah, but now I don't like white's position.
Yeah, it's true. So it's really who's playing for the win here.
Right.
Now, this gives me an occasion to mention something that is a perennial difficulty with my chess modeling. The engine is going to say 0.00 for every move. If I were to just use these values from the engine, it would seem like there was nothing to play for.
Right.
So that's a problem. In actual fact, there are lots of details and maybe different levels of skill the players need in order to navigate a position like this.
Correct.
And I try to find that in the lower depth values of the engines. And I have some reason to believe that I hit at least half of the phenomenon of what makes chess difficult to play, even in positions that are 0.000. So I have some internal indicators that I gain 2 to 3 percentage points of prediction by doing this. Uh, Nevertheless, if you're just looking at an engine like this, you don't understand a position like this at all. So, for instance, should black give checks or should black take the pawn? So it turns out the engine says with the zero point 0.0 value, you can do either, but which is riskier? Okay, that's hard to.
I take the pawn. Yeah,
And
in a
which one
heartbeat.
gives white more chances to place black into what is called the quote zone of one mistake, where you actually could create a critical position where there's only one way to play. Well, we're never actually going to see that critical position because Pragnananda's defense was very accurate. And in fact, there's one king move I really like coming up for black. So this is it. Okay, so black could give more checks, but instead what does and the engine says giving more checks is fine, but always check, check, check. It might be mate. Well, sometimes check just improves your opponent's position in a way that where the engine might still say 0.000, but your position has gotten critical and you have to find some better moves. So to anticipate that, Pragnananda played a very mature move. He said, okay, white, you can give some checks, but I want my king on a better square, guarding this.
Yeah.
Now,
Pawn queen takes pawn, for example.
yeah, now this queen takes pawn is really threatened. And now one motif here that is probably the reason why Carlsen was playing on for a win is that black cannot afford to trade queens.
Yeah.
So if you play here, then white will capture and make a queen on the queen side, running much faster than black's king side pawns.
Right.
Okay, so black does have to move the king, but now black's king is still guarding the pawn. White can check again, and now black says, okay, what are you going to do now? If you go back to e5, we make a draw. So Carlsen instead played queen g3, guarding his own pawn and putting the ball back in black's court.
Yeah, and when Ken comes back, he'll take over again. But the idea here is the king and pawn endings favor white.
About what to do.
Go ahead,
but yeah, go on. You're fine.
No, I was just
king and pawn endings favor white.
Yeah. And so can white force the king and pawn ending? And the answer appears to be no. So if that, then the game will be drawn. But it's still difficult to play. You have to find the defensive resources for black, always keeping in mind you can't afford to trade queens.
Right. And white's pawns still are a little more advanced than black's on the queen side. And black's A pawn is a significant weakness because white can attack it with the king.
Correct.
Okay, so black still has to watch out a little bit here. And so what
Wow.
Pragnanda judged
Wow.
is that black could afford to take time for this to take this pawn, which is often going to allow black more counterplay on the king side. Okay, so white gave check, and white decided. So it's interesting here. The check takes away the e2 square from the queen, but the problem with king b6 is that black's queen can still peek out this way.
And then defends the pawn from the
Yeah,
file
defend-
instead of the diagonal. Yeah.
right. And now there's black's queen is defending the pawn, and um, there's no convenient way for white to bring a second attack on the pawn. So even though the engine's still saying 0.00, black can actually start pressing his case for counter.
Correct.
Okay,
So this is introducing losing chances as well.
yeah,
And this is easily misplayed. So
right.
we think that the computer tells us it's 000. Yeah, well, even decent players are going to make mistakes in this type of ending.
Yeah,
most of the time.
right. Now the engine is saying white should take a draw by repetition, but actually maybe black. Oh no, black plays king h7. Now this is an example of where the engine sees some danger. This is what Carlsen is playing for. So queen e4 check, and you can't play queen g6 because
Right.
the reason that we mentioned. So black didn't actually gain anything. And in fact, with white's queen on e4, now because black's queen cannot emerge on g6, black is actually in a little trouble here. The engine says a4 is now effective. I was originally going to think of king b6 being the move, but
Right.
apparently black can play here and then recheck and recapture this pawn. So it's not so effective for white. But definitely white has the chances. So anyway, so black, I guess the players would feel this at the board. It is still black defending in this position. So anyway, say Carlsen, brought up his army on the queen side. Black reactivated the queen, and now
Wow.
if black's a6 pawn falls, white has a pawn that's close to becoming a queen, and in fact, it will become a queen. All right.
What do you think in general, Ken, about taking the H pawn by black? It seemed not to matter according to the engines, but according to a player, it seemed to me to introduce losing chances to white that weren't existing there previously, but also additional losing chances for black because of what we're just seeing, the advanced pawn on the queen side. Was it worth taking the time to grab that pawn on h5? I have no clear answer in my mind.
Yeah, it requires a lot of calculation of the kind that humans do and that the engine just washes out. I would say maybe the fact that g6 square became available was a prime motivation.
I think you're right. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
It defends the a pawn along the file, right?
Yeah. So anyway, this is, however, speaking more danger because now the a pawn falls. White is much closer to making a queen. Okay, so Pragnanda judged that he could do more pawn grabbing. So here we go. Now, white actually, however, part of the issue here is that white can't really afford to take time to pick up the a pawn. There isn't a convenient series of checks that does it, and if you just menace the a pawn, black can guard it on f1 or e2. So Carlsen, you only need to make one pawn become a queen.
Right.
So already now we're starting to see some places where the engine is giving a non-zero value for a suboptimal move. So Pragnanda launched right into his counterplay. Now he has a pawn on the 5th rank as well, and he's not afraid of white capturing and making 2 pawns, or of getting a strong supported pawn on g6. You play a pawn to the 6th rank, I'll play a pawn to the You play a pawn to the 7th rank, okay, well, I got to play defense. this was the one place where, averting my eyes to the engine, I thought white might have something. But white's queen isn't on the kind of square that can really take advantage of this. And even if you go queen g4 check, okay, how careful does black have to be about where to put the king? The answer is actually doesn't have to be careful at all.
Right.
So, you can take you take this pawn, but now this pawn's
Yeah.
gone. And the rook's pawn, even though it's on the fifth rank to black's third rank, isn't doing so much. And I'm not even sure that white could prevent a perpetual check here. That's the other problem. A rook's pawn does not provide enough shelter for the king. Indeed,
Right.
that becomes the theme after the way the game unfolds. So Carlsen played this to protect his a7 pawn, and now Pragnananda put a pawn on the seventh rank that's also protected, and this is dynamically equal. Well,
Well,
Carlsen went this way. I guess maybe
uh,
if you bring your king back, you can defend this pawn in a way that black can't defend that pawn, and queen b8 would smother black's queen.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but anyway, so Pragnananda still has to calculate. We'll stop the king from coming over, and now white can make a queen. But now this is the last cool juncture of the game.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is so according to the engine it doesn't matter, but I bet humanly it does matter. So most people would just say, okay, I take your queen, you take mine, I make a queen, and now I've got two pawns, you've got one, your pawn's a little more advanced, but it's an A pawn. However, this does give white the ability to centralize the queen with check and now play a move. Okay, so maybe you can't play a6 yet, but you could decide what to do with your king. In other words, white has a moment to think, and there might be a strategy that can put pressure on black. You're not going to know it looking at the engine, because the engine will always find black's moves. But anyway, white is still the one calling the shots here. So what Pragnananda must have calculated here is that black actually has the ability to check, because even though white has two queens, the two queens are on the back row. And there's a subtlety here too, which is, let's say white puts the king on e4. Let's see if the engine actually says that this gives black a win. Let's actually try it on f5 first. Okay, it does. So this is the other subtlety. This is the beautiful subtlety, is that usually when both sides have two queens, the player on move can give a lethal check. But the beautiful fact of this position is that with white's king on e4 or f5, white has no safe check. And black's queens are more active, and this means white's king is the deer in the headlights. And as soon as white makes a quiet move, black's two queens, and they're going to combine to give checkmate. The engine sees that the most white can do is stave off checkmate by sacking the queens. Okay, let's see if this was also the case for king e4. Yes, same thing. Black makes a queen. Oops, why is my screen frozen? Oh, okay. I think I crashed chess 24. We stop share. Oh, yes, I crashed chess 24. Okay. Well, anyway, maybe you so the point is that what white had to do, therefore, in order to respond to this check, was bring the queen to d4. And now when black captured and white captured, black was queening on g1 with check. And white does not get the chance to centralize the queen and call more shots. Instead, it's black's calling the shots, and black is able to easily get a perpetual check with white's queen in the corner, and that's exactly how the game ended.
Right.
Brilliant. Another interesting game was today played by Giri. Black pieces against his compatriot. And I had impressions that Giri would play for a win, even with black pieces, and it was a quite sharp position. Ending was very interesting with Giri having exchange against 1 pound and then 2 pounds, but it still gravitated to draw, but required very precise play by both players.
It did, and it wasn't clear which side was playing for the win toward the end. Although I think at the board, Jiri was.
Yes, at the very end, yeah.
Before we abandon the Carlson game, I wanted to make a few comments. Thank you for showing that because it's very instructive. The first thing is the isolated D pawn. Now, Alexander Baburin has written a wonderful a book called Winning Pawn Structures. Winning Pawn Structures basically covers the isolated D pawn positions very, very in depth. So that's a good source of education if you want, because the isolated D pawns come up so often, and they're important. Like you were talking about, how you can get your isolated D pawn rolling, how it can become a weapon. And but before that book was written, I studied the games of Karpov, and it seemed to not matter whether he had white or black, or whether he was defending or attacking, whether he had the isolated D pawn or was playing against it, he always won. So his games were incredibly instructive. And the other thing that we showed, because we're taught to have the two bishops and not the two knights, but Magnus used the two knights very effectively against the two bishops. So, all these rules of thumb are just that. They're rules of thumb. You have to calculate it in individual positions. And the ending was super instructive to me because, you think you got a pass pawn on the queen side that's going to win all the king and pawn endings. You've got the obvious advantage. But, then it looked like, white was starting to get into trouble, too, because the G pawn became very powerful very quickly. So it's just a fascinating game. The Chesterfield tournament is turning out to be very interesting in many aspects. Carlson's fighting to get back into the lead, but he needed to win that game, I think. And the player that's underperforming is Ding.
Yes.
So I don't know what's going on there. In any tournament, you can have a bad tournament, you can have a great tournament, so that you don't make too much of it. But that was an interesting thing that I wanted to point out.
And Ding won his first game. He got off to a good start.
Yeah.
Well, looks like he's busy with the preparation to the World Championship.
Well, there's that. Yeah. How much is that taking up his time and attention?
Not only that, he's not playing his strongest openings to hide his preparation.
Good point. Excellent point.
And actually, Jim, based on what you said, I would recommend to invent not instead of, but in parallel with the advantage of two bishops, to have two knights advantage as well. Because maybe in some positions, two knights is an advantage. And speaking about Karpov and his handling of this position with both black and white, it may not be so much whether the isolated pawn is advantage or disadvantage. It's the most important thing, who are the players.
Whose understanding is better, yes.
Yeah, maybe that's very, very important.
I think that was absolutely true in Karpov's case. He just understood the position better than his opponent.
I just have a feel that Carlson, essentially today he was playing a game that he had to win. It was almost must win. I wouldn't go as far as to compare it to a last game of Kasparov-Karpov match in Seville in 1987. Karpov must had win the last game. And I think Kasparov he played a very interesting, complicated game, avoiding exchanges. And for some reason, I feel that he had a better feel how to play for a win than what Carlson demonstrated today. But it's just my take of the situation, because he didn't create any troubles for.
Also wanted to point out that the U.S. representative, So especially, is doing very well.
Yes,
doing well, and Caruana's doing pretty well. They're all three kind of bunched around. I think So's tied with Carlson at this time.
Yes, he is. So what are your predictions for tomorrow?
Um, well, I think all Abdusattorov needs is a quick draw, and
Mm.
because let's see, we just check is Jury. Oh no, Jury's within a half point of him. I'm
Right.
sorry. So no, it's very interesting. Whom does Jury play?
So he's in a must-win position.
Right.
Yes,
He'll have white, I guess.
yeah, he has white tomorrow. Yeah.
Let's see. So tomorrow, Jury has white against Rapport, who's in the middle of the pack.
He's right, but he's
And
playing well.
Abdusattorov has white against Van Foreest. So it's a question of whether he will go for a win against Van Foreest.
He might as well. Yeah, he might as
Yeah.
well.
Carlson is black against Aragaisi. For the most part, the Indian prodigies and Maksudlu have been kept at bay in this
Mhm.
tournament. I mean,
So tomorrow is a fighting day, and don't forget that tomorrow's round start 2 hours earlier than all others.
Good
So
point.
for me or for Ken, it's 6 in the morning.
Right.
You're luckier, Jim. It's
a double incentive to get up would be to see if Djokovic can beat Tsitsipas in the Australian.
exactly. I don't know. I have a strange feel that Tsitsipas has chances.
Yeah.
Huh?
There's one point to make about Jury's game today, which is that Van Foreest played a really amazing bit of preparation, sacrificing an exchange
Yeah.
and leaving himself an undeveloped position where nevertheless he is the one with the play.
Yeah.
And Jury actually stepped into trouble, but Van Foreest couldn't capitalize on it.
I don't know, when he sacrificed in the opening exchange, I didn't feel that it's such a dangerous situation for Jerry, but apparently it was really good preparation by Van Forest. Yeah, I agree with you. So tomorrow we'll watch the last round of Weekend Day. We'll enjoy it one way or another. And of course, the great Australian Open Championship match coming up
Yeah.
now in a few hours. So thank you so much for this program, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the
Thank
best.
you once again, Sasha.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.